Hey everybody, welcome to the show. We've got Gordy Lockhart here, diversity and inclusion advocate from Tauranga. First of all, Gordy, congratulations on getting the rainbow crossing put in or authorized. Is it at the final step now where it's all finished and done and signed off, or is it like one more level of council to go through?
No. I think it's. I mean, essentially, the instruction from council, or the idea from the transport team of council was that, assuming the council approved it, which they did, it would be installed pre-Christmas, which is wonderful. So yeah, I mean, no date as yet. I have suggested that perhaps it would be a good idea to hurry up that process, but no date as yet.
Brilliant. Blake, I'll let you jump in before I take everything over again.
Yeah, yeah, this has been an avocation for you for several years, as I understand. Um,
Mm.
so how hard has it been? Because obviously there's been lots of highs and lots of lows. Um, have you found the process difficult, taxing? How's it been feeling for you?
Yeah, bloody good question. I mean, it's one of those things that's been, I guess, a project, main project, a side project, and has various sort of levels of sort of workload attached to it for 6 years. Along with a number of other people, I kind of co-founded Tarangamona Pride back in 2018, and as part of that, we discussed the idea of having a rainbow crossing for the Pride Week. And to be fair, this was prior to the change to NZTA regulations that allowed the installation of street art, any form of street art. But at that point in time, Tauranga City Council said no because it didn't reflect the NZTA regulations on pedestrian crossings. And the next year, 2019, we tried the same thing. The funny story with that one was that the week we got the rejection the second time was the same week that Wellington City Council painted the threshold of the Wellington City Airport in rainbow colours. And Tauranga City Council's view was that a rainbow crossing in Tauranga would distract drivers, which was odd given that it didn't distract the view of airline pilots travelling at several hundred kilometres an hour with hundreds of people on board. But then perhaps they hadn't considered Tauranga drivers
Right.
in that discussion.
Um,
Yeah. So yeah, sorry, Blake, carry on.
no, you carry on. Sorry.
No, it's all right. So yes, I mean, ultimately we got to 2022 when there was a whole bunch of stuff happening in Tauranga around some religious discrimination within the religious schooling environment, and that led to the third request for a rainbow crossing, which was denied again, which was slightly concerning because that was then after the change in legislation. So that seemed to perhaps that refusal seemed to perhaps based on something other than necessarily the legislative process. But then in this earlier this year, following the Gisborne and Auckland hate crimes that were the attacks on the rainbow crossings in those environments, I started a petition to Tauranga City Council to ask for the fourth time. And that went very well. That was interesting. And I guess before I come to your point around the challenges, Blake, the conclusion to that was the commissioners, the last meeting of the Tauranga City Council commissioners in May, forwarded it on to the first meeting of the new councillors, the new elected councillors, there in September, and thank goodness they passed the motion, which was marvellous. But your point around I guess challenges was is a good one, Blake. And the biggest challenge was not in the process of requesting a rainbow crossing. The biggest challenge was the online hate. And I guess you guys are probably know exactly what that's about. And that sort of stuff is and it's appalling. Full stop. There's no rhyme or reason why any online hate would be acceptable. But yeah, in the last 2 years, I've had 4 death threats. The stuff around the rainbow crossing was simply appalling. The connection between the LGBT community and paedophilia is mentioned several times. Some of the conspiracy theories that come out were incredible. I didn't even know this one. I had to check this one out. Apparently, there's the pink and white colours in the rainbow flag, which anybody who's in an educated sense would understand that's for the trans community. Apparently, no. Apparently, that's for the MAP community. And exactly, Paul, your face says it all. I didn't know what that was, so I had to Google it. Apparently, that's the minor attracted persons colours. Uh, So you think what, and so yeah, I mean, but then googling that all comes from conspiracy theories out of the United States, some far right lunatics that in that environment and so on. So that's been the biggest challenge, has been dealing with the very small minority of people who are prepared to hate, but the level of that hate is quite scary.
That brings me to my next question. So you talked about it being passed recently. So how much support did you have before it was passed from the subsequent commissioners and the Mr. Drysdale and the new council?
Yeah, good question. Well, the previous commissioners, I think, were slightly in a challenging position throughout their tenure in Tauranga. They were very aware that they were unelected. They were there as change makers, and I think in many cases they did very well. They did, what I would describe as the ones and the zeros, the infrastructure elements. They did that very well. They got huge changes through in terms of the dearth of the infrastructure requirement in Tauranga. And they did that very well. I worry, and I still worry, that Tauranga City Council misses out on the human a lot. Their attention on community development is lacking, and hopefully that will change over the course of this new council. But what was interesting with the new councillors was that even though that they themselves are perhaps not representative, they're not that diverse a group of people, they're all very progressive, it would seem, which is marvellous. Even those who perhaps hold some more conservative views do seem to be looking to the future. Which is great, and I think ultimately the committee who passed the Rainbow Crossing was just a committee of the full council, and there was 5 councillors on that, but the crossing passed 4-1, which I hope in itself is a major view of the shift in Tauranga diplomacy and democratic process.
I was going to say that the election earlier this year was a really interesting one to watch from the outside, because when I got inside, they yelled and screamed at me because he'd say things about some of their very vocal candidates about how incredibly anti-rainbow they were. Did that stir up a lot of issues in terms of the campaign for you, in terms of your particular campaign?
No, I mean, I guess during the election campaign, I mean, you may be aware that there was a system whereby you could sort of, as a member of the public, as a member of the electorate, you could sort of submit questions for the candidates to answer during some of the various debates. And I was sort of, heaping questions into that system based around wider diversity in general, not specifically necessarily the LGBT community. But I think it was interesting and it was telling in terms of a demographic. So there was one question that I asked about, how did the candidates feel Tauranga was progressing from the point of view of diversity and inclusion? And that question was asked at one of the debates in the Tariko ward. And what was really interesting was there was 4 candidates. Only 2 of them chose to answer the question live, standing up and answering the question. One of them said that he thought Tauranga was leading the field, quote, in diversity and inclusion because he knew a Filipino guy that was going to vote and therefore he was having his say.
I remember that.
Um,
Oh my God, yes. Yeah.
yeah. And then another guy stood up and said that he thought Tauranga was also leading the field in diversity because we have foreign food trucks at events. But I guess what's frightening about those kind of points is that view is clearly a view of a certain demographic in Tauranga. And while that will change in time, it's pretty horrifying that is the case.
Yeah. Oh my God. To
Yeah.
be fair, we did have Filipino food trucks here last weekend, which is
Yeah.
delicious. But I don't think that's really a sign of diversity within a community when it's one Filipino
No,
food truck.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, my point around the Rainbow Crossing in this context, and certainly around, what's been happening in Tauranga since the anti-LGBT violence of 21-22, is that the biggest threat we face as a community is not from those small percentage of haters. It's from the wider percentage of society who doesn't get involved. It's that idea, if you see somebody getting beaten up on a bus, what do? Are you going to, as a community, are you going to say that's not acceptable, or are you going to run away? And I think the worry that we have in so many senses is we run away these days rather than get involved. And back in 2022, when there was the Rainbow Youth Building was burnt to the ground in an arson attack, my view was that the Tauranga society should be getting together to say that's not acceptable. And in many cases, the problem we have is that wider society just doesn't really care. It's not that they are not sympathetic. It's not that they don't support the LGBT community. It's that simply it doesn't impact, they believe, their daily lives, and therefore they don't necessarily see the prejudice, or they're not necessarily prepared to get involved in aiding the prejudice. And that's one of the problems we have in society right now, is that we don't have this collective view of societal responsibility.
Actually raises a really interesting point about it's all good. There was some research that came out this week. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it. It's Stat NZ's wellness survey. They do this every couple of years.
Yeah.
One of the things I found really interesting in this year's survey is that they've got a really specific LGBTQ measure in place, and they compare that to the general population. And in terms of self-esteem, feeling safe, feeling comfortable in their own skin, particularly for young people in the rainbow community, those were far lower than you found in the general population. For me, that's why something like a rainbow crossing is a really important visible sign that there is support out there for people. I'm kind of wondering what your perspective is on those sort of findings, but also the importance of that visibility within the community.
Absolutely. I mean, I think instance I held recently. I have a little tourism business in Pilot Bay, and during Pride Week earlier this year, I flew the Pride flags at my business. And that was great. It looked fabulous in Pilot Bay in Mount Maunganui, and it looked superb in the sunshine. The number of same-sex couples who came along because they felt valued was great. A couple of stupid comments made by some, but we'll move on quickly from that. But this one particular day, I remember I sort of was quite quiet. There was some bikes out, but I was quite quiet. And I sort of looked to my right and spotted there was a couple walking along the beach, two blokes, couple walking along the beach holding hands. And I thought, that's really cool. That's fabulous if they felt comfortable enough to do that in that environment. So they saw the flags, they stopped, we had a chat. And I said, look, I'm just so pleased that you guys, feel comfortable to hold hands walking along the boardwalk. And their point at the time was, they said, yeah, we'll do it here in Mount Maunganui, but we wouldn't do it in Tauranga. And it was really interesting that these guys who were Gen Zs, they were sort of early 20s, had that view. They were making that distinction that one environment was okay to do it, whereas one other environment potentially held some physical threat towards them. And it was horrifying. And when I talk about general society not understanding prejudice, that's what I'm talking about. People don't consider that simply walking down the street with your partner of choice, hand in hand, could lead to physical violence. I don't think there is any other community in New Zealand that has that potential threat attached to their daily existence. So you're absolutely correct. A symbol of diversity, a symbol of acceptance of a community, is great from two perspectives. First of all, it highlights that concept of we are not a binary, concept, human beings. We are many, many different diversities. But most importantly, it says to those rainbow kids that it's okay, you be you.
What I would ask is, when you, as part of your agreement with the council, because we have seen so much vandalism, unfortunately, over the last couple of years, is there provision in place to ensure that it kept up to standard should the anti-groups return?
Yeah, I mean, a good point, Blake. And it's just the idea that you even have to consider that is horrifying, isn't it? I mean, that's just absolutely crazy. But yeah, you're right. I mean, the point was made at the council meeting that the council had to consider that there would be a cost for repainting regularly. As much as it's horrifying that's the case, they very much skewed it along the lines of the rainbow crossing or the rainbow street art being road marking, and thus road marking does need maintenance and it does need maintained. But slightly ironic when the online haters would use their dog whistle argument of the cost of install. And then, of course, those individuals may be the ones who would be responsible for the vandalism that would require additional cost, and so on and so on. So there is always that risk, and I guess it's down to the community being prepared to ensure that there is appropriate views on cameras of the crossing, and that people are caught and charged with hate crimes, as they were in Auckland. Because it needs to be made clear that that sort of behaviour is nothing short of unacceptable.
Anything else from you, Paul?
Well, I'm kind of curious as to what the next step is for you. You've been working on this for years now, and it's signed off. You've got the unveiling of it coming up at some point in time. Can I recommend the
Yeah.
14th of December? I'll be in Tauranga then visiting my best friend and his husband, so I'm very much hoping that it'll be up and available then. Um, have to climb the mount, though, and that part I'm not looking forward to. Um, I'm not a fit person. It's not good. But for you, what's next after you've spent years on this campaign? You've got this end line in sight now. What else can be done in the community to help grow that acceptance with people? And what are you planning on
Yeah.
doing next?
Well, my view is that, obviously, my focus as a person, my passion as a person is that idea that, we're here to leave a better tomorrow for those who follow, right? And I think that has various parts of it. For me, my main passion is obviously pride advocacy. But back in 2022, I started a charity called UBU Aotearoa. And the whole point is exactly that, you be you. And that does not matter whether you being you means that you are a Chilean Catholic single parent trans person. You be you. Similarly, if you are from Tauranga and you have a religious belief, fine, great, you be you. The defining line, the line in the sand in that respect, though, is that in my celebrating you being you, you have to celebrate me being me. And that is what a successful society does, right? So UBU is all about whole society diversity, and the idea that in New Zealand today we are represented by 200 ethnicities, a huge number more what we describe as social identities, which is the mix of diversities within individuals. And that's what's important, is that if we can get to a point where as human beings we celebrate all that we are for who we are, then we'll be a much, much better world. And I guess, to nut that down to some specifics, I looked recently at the Tauranga City Council inclusive cities strategy. And they have a headline that articulates what their concept is around an inclusive city. And I guess it's interesting in the sense that it talks about all ages and beliefs being the most two crucial points. And what's interesting is, of course, if you look at it from a diversity inclusion point of view, age shouldn't be an issue. Age is a discriminatory factor, not a celebratory factor. And belief is a choice issue, not a non-choice issue. And therefore, have a belief, sure, I'll celebrate you having a belief. But in terms of a priority around diversity, non-choice issues such as culture, diversity, gender expression, orientation, etc., have a way higher priority than a belief system. So there are some challenges we have in Tauranga, certainly, and I suspect probably wider New Zealand, around that understanding of what is diversity, what is inclusion, and what are appropriate levels of celebration of that. So UBU is where it's at, and check out the website, ubu.org.nz. We have some cool events on at the moment. We have a speaker series in Tauranga of three events, of which we've had the first. The second is on the 16th of October, where we have Helen Jacoby, who you maybe know was the first lesbian vicar in St Matthews in the city in Auckland, talking. We have Maritha Smith, who's the CE of Diversity Works. We have Michael Burnett, the former CEO of Auckland Chamber of Commerce. We have Jan Tinetti, MP, list MP for Tauranga Moana, and Buddy Mackay, a local historian, Kaumatua, and former Treaty Waitangi director. So those guys coming to town to talk about diversity and what it means and why we need to look at how our society moving forward can be advantaged by a diverse and equitable and inclusive space. So that's all very exciting.
Yeah.
Very exciting.
We'll put some detail down below so that people can learn more about it and hop along, I guess.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. Absolutely. If you guys wouldn't mind, popping the link in the description below, etc., etc., that would be fantastic.
Definitely. I think that's us done. Gordy, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your hard work. I know it's been a long slog. I've seen some of the comments that you get, and I am really, really impressed that you've managed to tackle them with such resilience and grace and charm. So it's very impressive that you got this far. Well done.
Thank you, Fano. Much appreciated.